Hey Sam,
Hello.
how are
Happy,
you?
pretty good. I'm glad tomorrow's Friday. Let's just put it that way.
I hear ya. I'm actually not gonna lie, I'm sitting on my bed because I want to take a little few nap after this is done.
Good, good. I love naps. I'm
I
not
know.
now, but
Yeah.
I'm ready for Friday. On Tuesday of this week, it felt like it should already be Friday. I don't know. It's been a week.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always hate like going into the weekend when it's like I feel like I have so much more work to do and I go, oh well, it'll be a break where I can get stuff done, but then it's like you don't get your weekend stuff done either. So
Sure.
it's
Yeah, right. Or you spend all weekend doing all the things you can't do all week because you're working and working and working and working, and then you don't get a weekend anyway.
I know. I know. It's yeah, there's got to be a balance somewhere. I think it's definitely difficult to find right now. So,
Yes.
as you know.
I do, but I've gotten better at balance a little bit in the last 2 years. I'm not good, but I'll say I'm better than I was.
Hey, it's improvement. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
better than anything, right?
Progress, not perfection, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, hello, everybody else. I see people joining, so welcome, welcome. I'm Sam, for those of you who may not know me. We do Mini Masterclass Thursday, the second and fourth Thursday of every month. However, I will be at an event next week during the fourth Thursday. So we're having it 2 weeks in a row, and we're doing it on the third Thursday this week or this month. So today we're going to talk about pricing for profit, for profitability. One of the biggest things I see and am asked is, how do I know if I'm profitable? How do I know if my pricing is right? How do I price my service or product? And I'll start by saying there are a million things that you can do, and every single one of them is going to be different for every business. And so there is no, this is the perfect science solution. However, there are lots of things that every business and every industry can implement at minimum and then refine and tweak for what works for your business. Some considerations you will have is geographic area. Someone in Los Angeles, California can price something very different than someone in the middle of Kansas or Iowa or a remote, smaller state or area. So you do have to take your actual geographic area into consideration. But there's great tools out there. A couple of our mini math classes ago, we taught implementing AI in your business. This might be a very good way to implement AI and ask it, in my area, or for 50 miles radius from my area, or 100, or whatever it is that you're trying to reach as your audience. What is the medium price for XYZ? Tell it what you want it to know, your service, your product, something like that. You can also look for margins. What are a typical company doing what I do, making on a margin? Speaking of margins, so all of the things we're going to talk about today are directly related to knowing your numbers, having good data and knowing your numbers, which means you are not only tracking them, but you're then looking at them, reviewing them, and using them in your business. So I'll just start by saying the whole crap in, crap out thing. If you're not putting good data into your systems, you're not going to get good data back in order to make these types of decisions. But this is part of the magic of what your numbers can give you, is the ability to make these decisions, informed decisions. When we're starting out, we're all throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks and not knowing if it's going to make money, lose money, sell, not sell, all of those things. But as you have data year over year, and one of the reasons why it's crucial that you don't do the I'm small, so it doesn't really matter if I keep my numbers right, you will miss so many opportunities to make yourself stronger, more profitable, and better faster if you don't have good, clean books up front. So that being said, first one I want to say, you want to price. How shall I want to kind of go in order, but not, these are not necessarily do this first, do that second. But your employees. One of the main reasons that companies lose profit is because they have to hire in order to fulfill the product or service that they're selling. But they don't build into their pricing as if they already have this team when they're first pricing their service. So when you're a one-man band, you can charge whatever you want because it's only affecting you and whether or not you can pay your bills. But once you start to scale and you have to bring others in, you either immediately need to do a price change to absorb the cost of that person, or my recommendation, if you can, is to start pricing when you're young and new as if you already have a team, which is going to mean that you have to figure out what you would be paying said person or persons when you bring them on. Now, we're not talking jumping from one person to 10 people because that is not how most businesses scale. You might want to do one or two extra people involved. And then when you get to there and you have those people, now you're looking to scale to, okay, we're going to need eventually 4 and 5 people to support us and so on. So to do that, you want to build in an estimated amount of salary that you think you're going to owe or have to pay for somebody to do the job that you need them to do to support your business to sell, to get to that place. That's called reverse engineering. I'm going to figure out I need $50,000 a year to support this person that I would like to bring in to either take over marketing, to take on sales, to take over the admin so I can focus on sales, whatever they're going to do, that is going to be around $50,000 a year. What would I need to sell this thing for in order to afford my own bills and also pay this person $50,000 and pay for my overhead? That's the exercise you're going to want to start with if you're starting from scratch, so that you price immediately and you don't get yourself into a pinch of being the cheapest guy because you're a one-man band when really you can't even afford to be the cheapest guy because you'll never be able to hire on for that much money, or you'll grow broke supporting the company and never taking a paycheck, which unfortunately is a mistake that I have made. Can tell you all these things I'm going to tell you I've done wrong. So that's how I know that they aren't the right way to go. But so when I was starting, I priced as a one-man band for years. And then the first person I got to help me, I was the one that suffered. I had to take it out of my pocket because I couldn't afford to pay her at the prices I was charging. And the only way to do that was to take money out of my own pocket. So how do you want to make sure that that employee then doesn't take you under? Because one of the biggest reasons I hear people say, I can't afford to hire, is that they haven't determined how their salary is going to make the company a minimum of 3 times what you're paying. So in the example of the $50,000 a year person, you need to figure out how their role makes you another $150,000 a year before you hire them, before you put the job description together, or as you're putting the job description together. Their role should support a minimum of 3 times their cost when you hire them. How do you know that? Do they take things off your plate that allow you to go out and sell more things or services in order to make that extra money? They give you capacity. They give the company capacity. That's one way to look at it. Do they actually sell the thing, therefore bringing in the revenue equal to a minimum? And you can put this maybe in like a compensation plan for them. You have to make a minimum, of 3 times your salary in order to do what you're supposed to do. The other way that they can contribute is by actually doing tasks that cost you less money to pay them than they do to outsource it, which typically is not really the way it works. Typically outsourcing tends to be a little bit cheaper, but that's another way they can make you 3 times what you're paying them. So that's one thing you want to do, is when you're figuring out what to pay and then building a role around that, be thinking, how does this make the business 3 times what I'm paying them? Now, the more you have to pay them, the harder that does get to do. So you need a higher level person. A higher level person is going to demand a higher wage. So it doesn't go away just because their wage goes up. You just need to demand more of them in order to make sure that that 3 times number is being satisfied. Now, this does not mean you're going to get this result immediately. This might take some time to ramp up into. You have to train them. You have to, include them in all your processes. You're going to have to spend the time. Please spend the time up front to do your SOPs, which are standard operating procedures, because I promise if everything's in your head when you go to hire, all you're doing is giving yourself double or triple the amount of work and time if you don't have a process in place that's documented that you can delegate. If you have to be the one holding the key all the time, it is going to be miserable for you. So make sure as you're doing these things, you're documenting your process. But when you hire, you're going to have to refine them. Every single person you hire will have a different perspective, will have a different way they interpret it, will have a different history or way they work. So things may not work for someone as well as they work for you, but at least it's a starting point, and then you can fine tune and tweak from there. So a minimum of 3 times your cost for your employees. Let's talk about cost. Their cost is not their hourly wage. Their cost is their hourly wage plus the taxes that you have to pay as an employer, which are you have to match their Social Security and Medicare. So the more they make, the higher those things are. That's the higher your taxes are. You also have to think about things like, do they have an email address that you have to pay $8.99 a month to Microsoft? Do you offer health benefits that you either pay for or match? Do you offer a 401k that you match? Do you provide uniforms? Do you provide truck allowances or car allowances, cell phone allowances? Any expense that is a direct result of having that body, so not a business expense, but that body is an employee cost. Therefore, the next exercise I encourage you to do, especially if you've already got multiple staff members, is figure out what they call your overhead burden rate, employee overhead burden rate. That means you take all of the costs that I just talked about and anything else that's specific to that body, and you figure out what then is your true cost on them. For example, if I have an employee that makes, even if they're on salary, you can figure out what their general hourly rate is. Now, this is not a perfect science, like I said, because your employees might sometimes work this much and sometimes work that much, especially if they're hourly. You might have other benefits that you have to take into consideration, but generically, you want to figure out their email address, their 401k match, their health insurance, their cell phones, anything you give them. Now take their average hourly work. So you're going to have to average it if it's not consistent. And you'll figure out then, workman's comp is another one. You want to figure out, okay, their wage plus all these expenses divided by a 40-hour week. That gives you kind of your average hourly cost for them. Now you need to charge 3 times that cost to ensure profitability, not just 3 times their wage. The thing that happens when you're not including overhead burden is that your pricing isn't absorbing your overhead. So you're not only having to pay your employee, but now you have to pay overhead out of that. And now you're left with way less profit than if your pricing absorbed the total cost of your employees. Again, ensuring at least a 3 times profitability on each employee. Now, if you don't have employees and you're maybe dealing with contractors, the same stays true. If your contractor is charging you $1,500, you need to charge your client $4,500 to make sure that you're absorbing their cost and making yourself profitable. So that's just a generic. Now, is that going to work every single time? Absolutely not. There may be instances where you can barely make 10% on something in order to make the deal. And every business has to do that at some point in time. But over time, you don't want to always be making your margins so skinny that you have nothing to work with. And when you scale, and as you scale, it costs money to make money. So you have to be ready to front load the expense of bringing on new employees, bringing in a new contractor, buying in bulk if you're doing inventory so that you can get a better margin in general when you sell it. But you have to be able to buy the big amount at a time rather than, something smaller. It works for every business, but I understand that you may have to baby step it. I want to give you guidelines of how can I become very profitable. The other way to do this is to review your margin of cost of goods sold. So cost of goods sold is a direct expense of selling the thing you sell, which is either a product or a service. If you sell earrings, you have to buy the earring at wholesale to resell it for your markup and make money. Your cost of goods sold should always be 33% or less of your total sales. Now, there's a really great report in QuickBooks Online specifically where it's your P&L, and then it has a filter where you can also see percentage of income in that filter. And that will tell you every single line item what the percentage of your income is for that line item. And cost of goods sold completely should be 33% or less, as well as payroll. So 33% of less of payroll expenses, 33% of or less of a cost of goods sold. Now, if you're an S Corp and you're an officer and you put yourself on payroll, you can actually back out your wages from that payroll costs and make sure it's just your employees' costs that are 33% or less, because your payroll ultimately goes to your K1 and it doesn't count towards that margin without getting too nitty gritty on that. So you can back those out. I see sometimes P&Ls where the payroll is like 73% of income. That gives you no room at all to have cost of goods sold, to have business expenses, to increase your payroll, to make any moves, because your whole business is teetering on 33% and then you're in the red. So those are two margins to look at: 33% on cost of goods sold and payroll. Now, if you're doing the 3 times the cost on payroll, you're always going to be at 33% or less because you're making 3 times, and therefore your payroll is a third or less of your income. Sorry. The next thing is budgeting. We all think of budgeting as projections for what we'd like to have, but really it can help you understand where you're at and also what you need to go where you want to go. So for example, if I do, this is hard to do when you first start. Again, I know you are just hoping it all works and the costs are what they are and you don't know really what's going on. But even after 1 year in business, you can take your actuals from the year before, your first year in business, and then you can start saying, okay, this year I want to make more money. I want to hire. I want to start a marketing campaign. I want to make just more profit. So I want to reduce my expenses, but keep the same sales. There's so many things you can decide as a business that you want to do. Your budget will let you show you, this is what we did last year. Now, what is it going to take to get where we want to go? Do I need to, if I want to hire someone for that 50,000, how much do I have to sell to support their salary and still be profitable with them making 3 times the amount of money that I'm paying them? And then you again reverse engineer to that. You put it all out there on paper, you create your budget, but then you're able to go through and say, now, what is that going to take? What does that look like? Do I have to sell more ads? What is my return on investment from my ads? Advertising and marketing is not a sure thing, and it is not a instant gratification scenario. It's very long-term. It's very consistency based, showing up, being the leader in your industry, being out there on advertisings, being the first one to something, being present in not meetings. Oh my gosh, I've lost my word. That thing, networking events. There you go. doing those activities is something that gets you business later, not today. Now, if you're lucky, there'll be somebody ready today to make a decision and buy from you, but typically that's not what. So you're front loading the cost. You're paying for the marketing to get the return from that marketing. I do have a chat message, so let me go to it. How is employees' salary factored into a breakdown into the Fair Labor Act, such as Davis Bacon, et cetera? Wow, such a intricate question for government project. There, I may be answering this wrong, so tell me if I am, but there is a prevailing wage standard usually for government projects, which you actually have to only do what they tell you you can do. You can't increase their pricing. You can't pay them more or less. You have to pay them a specific amount. In those cases, in every single case that I've seen in that case, it's a losing battle for the company because your prices are typically not built around that minimum. They're built around another minimum, and you can't actually adjust for it unless you know going into the contract what those prevailing wages are. And then but to get those jobs, you have to usually be the lowest bidder. So the lowest bidder isn't going to be highly profitable, in which case it is more of a marketing and business in volume versus quality over quantity scenario. So I don't know. I hope that answered your question, but yes, there's very little you can do with government contracts as far as what you can charge or what you pay people that I've seen.
Would I be able to talk, or everyone can hear me?
Yes, you can, but you
Oh,
can.
great. So one of the reason I asked, because for example, right now my standard rate for my staff would be $19.50. But let's say the same staff, if we applied that on the federal work, let's say I'm going to be veteran affair VA work. The standard, the prevailing wage would mandate $25 an hour. Which typically on typical project, you can never afford to pay the staff that much. So in order to do the payroll, you use the same staff. Now you have to pay him two separate rate. How are we going to factor this in? Should we build him just $19.50 and then build that difference on the overhead? This is where, it's kind of confused me. I'm start getting to that point, but I don't want to stumble.
Right. I'm really glad you're bringing this up because I just was working with a customer who's like, why are we even doing prevailing wage work? We're losing our ass on it because by the time you pay workman's comp on the higher rate and your business liability is going to be affected by your total overall payroll being higher, which is a higher liability. It does not ever take into consideration the ebbs and flows of prevailing wage work either. It's just one big total. So the business in general is going to pay a lot more money to accept prevailing wage work. But what you could do is factor in a middle, when you quote or bid, you could factor in a middle range, like from 19 to 25, maybe pick 22 instead to bid off of instead of their low rate, because you're not going to pay them the low rate. It may win you less projects, but in general, then you're losing less money than you would otherwise because the business is going to have to absorb.
Beside that, I would just say, let's say Jackie, I pay her $19.50, and now I want her involved in the federal project. How would I? Let's put aside the difference there. Now because the payroll, I have to show that I pay Jackie $25 an hour. How do I shift from $19.50 to that 25, and then all of a sudden I don't have federal project anymore? Am I going to shift her back to $19.50? How is that going to work?
Yeah, and Jackie's not going to love that because once you pay her 25, she's like, "Hey, I want to keep making 25 to do the same work." So again,
there's no solution, huh?
There's no easy solution.
Okay.
I think that's where an employment contract might be helpful, where you say for these types of projects, you're going to make this much, but everything else, this is our rate, this is your rate. You might offer other types of perks to compensate for the differences when they do happen, but you do have to create a separate payroll item where you pay her one rate for one thing and the other rate for the other things. So logistically,
so it
that's
start
how
getting complicated.
It does get very complicated. And imagine now you have people with multiple rates and
Right, I'm using just
regular
one
time.
example
Yes,
because
you're
a
using an
team
easy
could be
example.
10, 15 people. Now you're gonna, unless you want to hire a completely different team to do the same, the different type of project, but then it start getting kind of convoluted as well. Okay, thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. And that was my next suggestion, is having a team that just does prevailing wage work and they work whenever there's work, and having another team that's admin or all the time.
Right.
And they just make different amounts of money.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thank you. So budgeting will let you say, okay, especially if it's profit, regarding profit. Last year we're just going to hope that you're in the green here, but last year I made 5% profit total for my business. This year I want to double that. It sounds like a lot, but you're only trying to go from 5% to 10%. What does that mean? 5% or 10% of the same exact amount that you sold this year? Or do I also want to hire an additional person? And what is that going to take? And then 10% off of what it would take for that equals this. And then you back into it. So budgeting, pricing for a minimum of 3 times your cost. So again, cost is not just hourly rate. Cost is all these other things included in having an employee, even or a contractor, which that's just a lot easier most of the time. And then figuring out your employee burden is how you get to knowing the actual cost. And these are exercises you can do in QuickBooks Online. Specifically, that's where we work. And how we do that is we create a class that is for employee burden. No, a lot of people don't like that word. So employee overhead, let's call it. And every single thing that is employee related, you tag with a class of employee overhead. Now you can run a report easily, a profit and loss by class, with those specific things in there, and start doing the math. Really, you're going to need spreadsheets and it's going to be a whole exercise, but that is how you can easily identify those items, and what we do and what we use to help our customers. The budget also is right inside of QuickBooks Online. You can start from scratch. You can use last year's actuals to build and change from. You can sort and subdivide and have an overhead budget versus a project budget, which is another thing you can do. And then COGS, that other important report was the profit and loss with the filter of percentage of income on it, so that you're able to see that you're staying within those margins. If, for example, your margins are high on cost of goods sold and you say, oh gosh, my cost of goods sold is 50% right now of my income, I need to change that. Your options then are change your pricing so that that same dollar amount is 33% or less, and then figure out what that means for your customers. Or you go supplier shopping. Is there someone else in your area, or if you don't even need it in your area, just someone else in general who can help you and reduce your costs as a supplier? Those are things you can do by using your numbers to make sure that you're pricing for profitability and that your margins are staying in a place that helps you be profitable. Those are the 3 tips that I have for us today. Are there any other questions, comments, suggestions, concerns that I can help you with while we're all together?
Yeah. Sam, are you, I know the meeting's being recorded, but will you have a summary of this? Because I've been taking notes, but I know that there's some things that I missed.
Yes.
Because I think this will be really helpful.
Yeah, we do summarize all of these.
Okay.
And so, yes, we will.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you for everyone joining live. And if you're catching the replay, we would appreciate you watching as well. We'll see you on the 2nd Thursday of, where are we going? April, because third quarter is almost, or no, third quarter, what am I saying? First quarter is almost over. I can't even believe it. But second, you're welcome. Second Thursday in April. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
You too. Bye.